Hey everyone, and welcome to the Decks of the Week, the weekly series where I showcase the top 10 best decks in Marvel Snap. If you find this content helpful, hitting the like button is the best thing you can do. It's free and it helps tremendously, and I'd be forever grateful. With that being said, let's get started with something a little different here. We're doing a bonus deck here. This is the 11th deck, and it's a weekend mission deck. Grandmaster is not cracking the top 10 best decks of the week, but if you're looking for a deck to get those tokens, well, here's one for you. This is a personal brew that I developed over like the 20-something hours of me playing Grandmaster over the course of the Twitch drops, which, by the way, if you haven't gotten your Twitch drops yet, use the link in the description down below to join us on Twitch, where I'll get it for you, no problem. I tend to stream a lot during Twitch drops, and what we got here is a deck that I'm very confident in. I tried to rejuvenate Black Bolt and Stature with the kind of fallback of the Doctor Doom. What's amazing about this deck is the disruption that something like a Ravonna into Taskmaster can do, because I said Taskmaster, but I meant Grandmaster. Grandmaster is a one cost with Ravonna, and what you can do is you can actually play Grandmaster on turn 4 after you play something like a Rockset or Black Widow, which is tremendously impactful against your opponent's hand and their deck. Most notably, if you on turn 5 play Black Bolt, on turn 6 you can play Darkhawk, Mystique, that's 5 energy with Ravonna on the board, and you actually have enough energy for the Stature as well. So this deck has tremendous blowout potential on turn 6 for your opponent, while also providing a lot of disruption along the way. I like this deck a lot. Its win rate was tremendous for me over the course of my playtesting, and I can't wait to cover it in a video in the upcoming week. With that being said, let's dive into our statistical top 10. We're starting at number 10 here, and this is where Thanos comes into play. Now, Thanos has actually dropped quite a bit with the nerf to Blob. You would have thought nerfing Blob actually nerfed Thanos by association. And of course, at a 54% win rate, it is still decent enough, but its cube rate at 0.27 is merely okay. You're going to see a lot of decks that get into the 30s and 40s on this list, so if you're looking for a deck to climb to infinite or to climb in rank, you're going to want that cube rate style deck. This here barely makes the list. It's still good, but unfortunately it's running the Leech variant, which I know is very popular in the meta right now. But regardless, the nerf to Blob was definitely being felt in this deck, and it is showcased in the actual win rate and the cube rate. So the nerf has proven to be effective statistically after a week or so. Going to number 9 here, we have Tribunal, which is making some rounds. Now, Tribunal is also a consideration for those that are trying to win 3 locations at once for the weekend mission, but what I will tell you is that Tribunal is a actual legitimate deck now. At a 0.34 cube rate, that's pretty high for a deck that generally kind of you see coming from a mile away. The 55% win rate is actually relatively high, considering that Tribunal has a lot of retreat conditions, but honestly, the deck's working well. The kind of splash in of Super Scroll is actually really cheeky. The meta relevance of Tribunal is increasing. You're seeing more people playing Tribunal, and if you are going to be playing it for the weekend mission, that Super Scroll is going to steal games for you because your opponents are going to be playing the Iron Man and Tribunal kind of games. So I do think that this deck has a lot of potential to steal some cubes over the weekend. Tribunal coming in at number 9. Number 8, we have Galactus. Now, this is a new form of Galactus that's emerging in the meta. It's running Selene and, of course, the Goblins. Now, what's notable here about this version is that it's really an Annihilus-based deck. Now, Annihilus and Galactus were seeing a lot of comparable play with each other. However, what was happening was the bounce base and other styles of Annihilus kind of trumped the Galactus style versions, and that actually still happens this week. But this deck is actually climbing up in the rankings. At a 0.28 cube rate, it's fairly decent, but it's a 55% win rate on the upper echelon there, and it's actually pretty damn good. What I like about this deck specifically, however, is of course the Goblins. But one thing you need to know is that the Goblins should not be played on the edges anymore because of the prevalence of Grandmaster. People are still playing and testing Grandmaster during this opening week, and Grandmaster can send those Goblins right back to you. If you play the Goblins in the center, it's less likely that Grandmaster can't send them back. So that's something worth noting if you're going to be attempting to play this deck, especially this week when people are still testing Grandmaster. We have Shinnok coming at a 56% and a modest Q rate at 0.27. Again, these decks that have very predictable play patterns and retreat patterns, these are the ones that are not getting the high cube rates, especially since when you snap on Shinnok, your opponent pretty much knows what's up, right? You snap into Leech, they know that you snap into skipping turn 6 because you know they're running a deck that doesn't have location correction or whatever, and they kind of understand, oh, they probably have She-Hulk and Infinite. Can I beat that? No, I retreat. That contributes to a low overall cube rate. However, the deck still performs very well at a 56% win rate and continues to be one of my absolute favorite in the meta. I just like playing it. It's kind of comfort food for me, and I gotta say, like, if I'm just gonna try and rank up and casually play, then this is one of the ones that I'll turn to if I'm not playing my new Black Bolt brew, which honestly I'm quickly falling in love with. With that being said, let's move on to deck number 6. Now we're starting to get into a little bit of an interesting territory here. This is a high percent win rate deck, but a very low cube rate deck. At 0.20, the cube rate feels a little too low. However, what I'll tell you is that a 57% win rate does allow you to win these battles of attrition against players who are playing the weaker statistical decks. Now, I do think this deck has promise, and I'm including it in this video because I think that you're going to see variations of this deck that eventually will start to outperform some others. Now, at number 6 in the rankings, it's still pretty good, but I think that if you're trying to rank up, I think you want to focus on the cube rate sometimes, not just the win rate, and that here is kind of a bit of a factor. The low cube rate is holding it back from the rankings, although I do think it can be very disruptive, especially with the Mobius and Mobius. There is a ton of cost reduction right now with Ravonna and Zabu, and I mean, even to some extent, Sarah, of course. But Ravonna and Zabu are all over the place, and Mobius and Mobius says no. Not happening. So anyways, number 6, we have Kingpin Move, and I would expect new iterations of this deck to actually improve its cube rate. We go to number 5, and this is Lockdown. Now this is where the cube rates start to get much stronger. At a 0.36 cube rate, we have a very strong performer here at 57% win rate. What actually contributes to the high cube rate here, I believe, is actually Quake. I mean, there's a number of different things. You have the value of the Ms. Marvel, but it's the surprise factor of Rogue, and it's the surprise factor of Quake. As I've been competitively playing a little more frequently, I've started to realize that the surprise factor is a good way to create snap conditions where you can steal cubes from your opponent. And I think that Quake and Rescue, I keep saying I can't even speak today. I think Quake and Rogue do provide you with those snapping opportunities to steal like those 4 and 8 cube games where your opponent might feel a little too, I don't know, confident in their position, and you're able to swipe it away from them rather quickly. So this deck has a couple different surprises, which has elevated it in the ranks, particularly with the cube rate. We go to number 4 here. Number 4 is Hella Casino. This actually surprises the hell out of me. Hella Casino running a 57% win rate with a 0.37 cube rate. How is this even possible? It's actually quite crazy. To incorporate Hella into a Black Knight style deck, you basically get the best of both worlds, and ultimately the deck is performing. It has a large number of games. This isn't a statistical anomaly. This is the real deal. And honestly, it's fun as hell. Like, it's fun. It's frustrating too. Like, you're going to lose games. You're like, seriously, that's an 8 cube loss because Hella decided to throw that thing over there instead of, like, you're going to have those moments. You're going to, you know, but hey, God of the days where you discard Hella with Blade, that's a nice little thing, right? I mean, unless you're inebriated and you blade your Hella on purpose. But regardless, this deck is actually starting to perform, and all the additional pieces that discard has been getting is making a difference. So here we got Hella Casino at number 4. We go to number 3 here, we have Destroy, the former number 1. Now, the win rate's kind of coming down a little bit. The cube rate remains astronomically high at 0.41 cubes. That's ridiculous. And I think what happens here is that there are a couple factors. Now, you're going to notice right off the bat, I mean, maybe you didn't notice. Maybe you assumed it was just a regular Destroy deck, but it's not. It has Lady Deathstrike in it, and it is statistically outperforming even the more traditional base Destroy deck. I think that the addition of the Lady Deathstrike is actually catching some people off guard. And don't sleep on the Lady Deathstrike and Forge combination in the event that you don't use your Forge with your Deadpool. Pretty interesting stuff. Lady Deathstrike has some significant surprise factors, especially considering I'm seeing a whole lot of Wong in the meta right now. You're seeing Wong out there because a lot of people are trying like the discard combo style decks with Gambit and Meek. You're seeing a lot of Wong because people are playing more negative with Grandmaster. You're seeing a lot of experimentation with these low power, high impact cards, and Lady Deathstrike eats them for lunch. So anyways, this version of the deck in this current meta with Grandmaster coming out and a lot of the experimentation with these combo-based decks is giving Lady Deathstrike an opportunity to shine and destroy. You'll love to see it at number 3. We go to number 2 here, and we're getting into some actual bangers here. Now, this is actually interesting. A 58% win rate, but a very modest cube rate. This is one of those situations where, like, what do you want to prioritize? You have the ability to disrupt with the Darkhawk base shell. Of course, you have the Ms. Marvel, Leech, and Dr. Doom. This package of disruption with Darkhawk is making a comeback. It's funny, you nerf Blob and Darkhawk comes roaring back, right? But the cube rate here is what keeps it off from the top slot. A very strong win rate, and this is off a very large number of games, so we're seeing a very consistent play pattern of this deck being able to to perform. But however, it's not taking people by surprise, which surprises me because of the Shadow King inclusion. With Shadow King and with Leech, you should be able to kind of steal some cubes away, especially if you're snapping preemptively into turns where you can take advantage of them. Regardless, 0.27 cube rate does hold this one back slightly, but a very strong win rate that'll allow you to win some battles of attrition, particularly in Conquest. And then we go to the number one, and this is by and far the absolute leader of the meta in its Annihilus bounce. This deck here at a 59% win rate and a 0.40 cube rate is tremendously performing. I first heard from this deck from KM. I think that he was one of the first to identify that Annihilus based bounce was going to be an absolute banger, and they were right. You got an absolutely fantastic shell that's working to tremendously impact your opponent's hand with your, of course, your Spider Ham and others, while also giving you the opportunity to do some interesting stuff with the Shadow King, Sentry, and Annihilus. The inclusion of Werewolf by Night is actually kind of interesting here because you're not seeing a whole lot of Werewolf by Night. Isn't it interesting to see that even after the nerf, Werewolf by Night is holding top spot in this meta report? Because honestly, it's performing very well. And what else is there to say other than Annie is back? Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in that next Marvel Snap video.